Is it possible for a mere 2 minutes and 45 seconds of recorded sound to hold more harmonic weight, structural integrity, and emotional devastation than the entire combined discography of the last 2 decades of popular music? To understand why, because stands as the crowning jewel of the Beatles' musical sophistication, one must abandon the trivial, pedestrian notion that this is simply a pop song found on the second side of Abbey Road. It is not. It is an exercise in sonic architecture, a masterclass in vocal counterpoint, and a piece of chamber music that accidentally found itself on a rock and roll record. For the discerning listener, the one who craves the complexity of Yes or the textural density of Pink Floyd, because offers a gateway into the very specific genius of the band when they stopped trying to be idols and started functioning as serious composers. This is a track that separates the casual hum-along fan from the individual who understands the mechanics of tension and release. It demands that we look under the hood of the composition, ignoring the celebrity of the men who wrote it, to witness a level of craftsmanship that borders on the miraculous, especially considering the primitive technology of 1969. The mythology surrounding the song is well-worn, yet often misunderstood by the layman, who lacks the theoretical vocabulary to grasp the nuance. The story goes that John Lennon heard Yoko Ono playing the first movement of Ludwig van Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, the piano sonata number 14 in C-sharp minor, and asked her to play the chords backward. A nice anecdote, but a musicologist knows that simply reversing a progression note for note usually results in musical nonsense. What Lennon actually did was far more intuitive and musically intelligent. He took the harmonic implication of the Beethoven piece, the relentless, triplet-based arpeggiated movement, and the somber C-sharp minor tonality, and inverted the harmonic structure. He did not literally reverse the notes on the staff, he reversed the musical logic. Where Beethoven descends into the grave with a heavy, funereal motion, Lennon ascends toward the ether. This distinction is vital. It shows a composer who, despite lacking formal training, possessed an innate understanding of voice leading that would make a conservatory professor weep. It validates the argument that the ear is superior to the eye. Lennon could not read the notation, but he could hear the mathematical relationships between the intervals. Let us dissect the harmony, for that is where the blood of this track flows, and it is where most modern songwriting fails miserably. The song sits firmly in C-sharp minor, a key historically associated with intimacy, sorrow, and tragic love in the grand orchestral tradition. The opening figure, played by George Martin on an electric Baldwin combo harpsichord, establishes a brooding atmosphere that is immediately unsettling. Why? Because of the Neapolitan chord. In the key of C-sharp minor, the diatonic chords are predictable, but Lennon throws a D natural major chord into the progression early on. In music theory, this flattened second degree is known as the Neapolitan chord. It creates a friction, a sliding sensation that feels like the floor is tilting beneath your feet. It does not belong there, yet it is the most beautiful moment in the verse. This D major chord pulls the listener out of the minor key darkness for a fleeting second before the progression eventually winds its way toward the dominant tension. This is not the 3-chord strumming of Love Me Do or the blues-based predictability of their peers. This is harmonic writing that shares more DNA with Chopin or Debussy than with Chuck Berry. It represents the moment where rock music ceased to be a folk art and became a high art. The instrumentation further elevates this piece from a song to a soundscape, and the specific choices made here are crucial to its enduring power. We must address the absence of percussion. There are no drums on Because. Ringo Starr provided a gentle hi-hat guide track for the recording to help the musicians keep time, but it was wisely removed from the final mix. The inclusion of a drum beat would have tethered the song to the earth, giving it a corporeal, human time feel. By removing the rhythm section, the track floats in suspended animation. Time becomes fluid. The pulse is maintained not by a snare drum, but by the relentless hypnotic arpeggios of the electric harpsichord and Lennon's guitar, which mimic the precise mechanical movement of a clock that is slowly running out of power. This decision forces the listener to focus entirely on the tonal colors. It removes the kinetic energy of rock and replaces it with the potential energy of static tension. Then, there is the synthesizer. 1969 was a year where the Moog synthesizer was largely treated as a toy, a gimmick for making sci-fi noises or novelty records. George Harrison, however, treated it as a serious orchestral instrument. With the help of George Martin and engineer Mike Vickers, he programmed the Moog 3 modular system to produce a tone that mimicked a French horn, but with a synthetic, icy sustain that no human lung could achieve. This synthesizer line does not take a solo. It weaves through the bridge, doubling the melody and adding a layer of uncanny valley texture. It sounds ancient and futuristic simultaneously. It is a lesson in restraint. In an era where progressive rock was about to explode into 20-minute keyboard solos by the likes of Keith Emerson or Rick Wakeman, the Beatles used this cutting-edge technology to play only a handful of notes, each one placed with surgical precision to reinforce the melancholy of the composition. This reflects a maturity that most bands never reach, the ability to let the technology serve the song, rather than allowing the technology to dominate the arrangement. However, the true miracle of Because lies in the vocal arrangement. We are listening to a 9-part harmony. In reality, it is John Lennon, Paul McCartney, and George Harrison singing a 3-part harmony, which was then overdubbed twice. 3 men, 3 passes, 9 voices. To execute this requires a level of vocal discipline that is virtually extinct in the modern recording industry. Today, a producer would record 1 take and use digital pitch correction software to manufacture a chord. These men had to sing it. They had to stand around a microphone, blending their timbres in real time, breathing together, starting and stopping consonants with millisecond precision. Consider the difficulty of this. Pitch is not fixed, it is relative. When singing complex chords, particularly chords with diminished intervals and close dissonances, the singers must constantly adjust their intonation to keep the chord in tune. A mathematically perfect C-sharp might clash with an A natural if the context changes. Lennon, McCartney, and Harrison had to listen to each other with the intensity of a string quartet. Lennon took the low mid-range, McCartney took the high register, straining at the top of his chest voice, and Harrison glued them together in the difficult middle harmony. The result is a sound that is thick, monolithic, and terrifyingly massive. It sounds less like a rock band and more like a choir of fallen angels. When they hit the word love in the bridge, the chord blooms into a dissonance that is almost painful before resolving. This is the human voice pushed to its absolute limit of expressive capability within a pop context. It is a texture that cannot be replicated by plugins. It requires the physical vibration of 3 distinct larynxes interacting in a room. The lyrics, often dismissed by cynical critics as drug-induced nonsense, deserve a closer reading through the lens of transcendentalism and the countercultural philosophy of the late 60s. Because the world is round, it turns me on. On the surface, it is simplistic. Dig deeper. It is a statement of elemental acceptance. It reflects a state of heightened awareness where the physical laws of the universe, the roundness of the earth, the blueness of the wind, become sources of ecstatic experience. The wind is not just blowing, it is high, a double entendre that suggests both velocity and intoxication. The text is sparse. There is no narrative. There is no boy meeting girl. There is only the observer and the cosmos. In the context of 1969, with the band facing inevitable fragmentation and the idealistic dream of the 60s curdling into cynicism, this retreat into abstract elemental imagery is profound. It is a withdrawal from the political and the social into the purely existential. It suggests that the only truth left is the physical reality of the planet itself. We must also appreciate the production prowess of George Martin and engineer Jeff Emmerich. They were the architects who translated the band's raw ideas into this refined tapestry. The decision to record the vocals with the Dolby noise reduction system bypassed, or perhaps the way the tape saturation was pushed, gives the voices a breathless quality. You can hear the air moving through their throats. The lack of reverb on the main tracks brings the singers uncomfortably close to the listener's ear, while the instruments seem to reside in a cavernous distance. This spatial contrast creates a 3-dimensional image in the stereo field. It is a mix that rewards high-fidelity listening equipment. On a cheap radio, it sounds pleasant. On a reference system, it sounds like a physical presence in the room. This focus on sonic fidelity was pioneering. They were not just documenting a performance. They were painting with sound from a historical perspective, because acts as a bridge between the psychedelic pop of 1967 and the serious progressive rock of the 1970s. One cannot listen to the vocal arrangements of Queen, particularly in Bohemian Rhapsody or Somebody to Love, without tracing the lineage back to this track. The Electric Light Orchestra, yes, and even the early art rock experiments of Genesis owe a debt to the legitimacy the Beatles lent to classical fusion here. They proved that a rock band could utilize the harmonic language of the 19th century without sounding like a parody. They legitimized the use of the synthesizer as a melodic instrument rather than a sound effect generator. They showed that heaviness does not come from distortion or volume, but from harmonic density and atmospheric pressure. A band like Radiohead, decades later, would mine this same territory of dread and beauty. But the blueprint was laid here. It is also crucial to acknowledge the irony of the song's creation. By this point in their career, the business relationships between the band members were deteriorating, and the Get Back sessions earlier that year had been a disaster. Yet during the Abbey Road sessions, there was a conscious effort to return to the studio discipline of their earlier years. When the red recording light turned on for Because, they were able to set aside their ego and differences to blend their voices into a single, unified organism. Because requires total selflessness. If one singer tries to dominate the mix, the chord collapses. If one is out of tune, the spell is broken. For those sessions, they were forced to be one entity again. There is a tragedy in that perfection. We are hearing the sound of a dying giant gathering its last reserves of strength to create something beautiful before the end. The structure of the song itself defies standard verse-chorus expectations. It is circular. It does not really have a chorus in the traditional sense. It has a recurring harmonic cycle that intensifies with each repetition. The bridge section, with its sudden modulation and the introduction of the Moog, serves not as a release but as a heightening of the tension. The song ends not with a bang, but with a fade-out on the vocal cord, lingering in the air like smoke. This lack of resolution is key to its staying power. It does not give you the satisfaction of a final tonic chord slammed home. It leaves you suspended, wanting more, forcing you to engage with the silence that follows. This refusal to resolve is a sophisticated compositional device that keeps the listener trapped in the song's mood long after the record has stopped spinning. For the student of music, Because offers endless lessons in voice leading, the art of moving from one chord to the next with the minimum amount of movement for each individual voice. Watch how the bass line, played on the keyboard, moves contrary to the melody. When the melody goes up, the bass goes down. This contrary motion is the hallmark of great classical writing. It opens up the sonic space and prevents the frequencies from muddying each other. It creates a sense of expansion. The inner voices, the middle harmony parts, move in chromatic steps, slipping through the cracks of the scale. This chromaticism is what gives the song its slippery, uneasy feeling. It is never quite settled. It is always searching for a home that it never quite finds. It mirrors the restlessness of the human condition. Furthermore, consider the timbre of the electric harpsichord. The Baldwin electric combo. Harpsichord was an odd instrument. It had an aluminum body construction and plastic plectrums plucking the strings, picked up by magnetic pickups. It lacks the woody resonance of a traditional acoustic harpsichord and the sustain of a piano. It has a percussive biting attack and a quick decay. This brittleness contrasts perfectly with the lush, sustained vocals. If they had used a Steinway grand piano, the song might have sounded too romantic, too lush, perhaps bordering on the sappy. The electric harpsichord gives it a cold, mechanical edge that prevents the song from becoming sentimental. It sounds baroque yet modern, a juxtaposition that defines the aesthetic of the late Beatles era. It is a sound that evokes a clockwork orange, beautiful but slightly synthetic and dangerous. The song is a rebuke to the lazy listener. It offers no catchy hook to hum in the shower. It offers no danceable rhythm. It demands total attention. It asks you to appreciate the beating frequency between two slightly detuned oscillators. It asks you to feel the emotional weight of a diminished chord resolving to a major chord. It is elitist music in the best sense of the word. Not because it excludes people based on class, but because it excludes those unwilling to engage their brains. It raises the bar for what popular music can achieve. It suggests that the radio doesn't have to be a sewer of three-chord redundancy. It challenges the audience to rise to the level of the art, rather than lowering the art to the level of the lowest common denominator. When we analyze the bridge section, the lyrics shift to, "Love is old, love is new." Here, the harmonic rhythm accelerates. The chords change faster. The anxiety builds. The synthesizer line weaves a counter melody that interferes with the vocal harmony, creating new accidental dissonances. This is the peak of the song's arc. And then, just as quickly, it drops back into the hypnotic arpeggio of the main verse. This dynamic control, the ability to swell and recede, is masterful. It mimics the breathing of a living organism. It demonstrates that dynamics are not just about volume, but about intensity and harmonic density. The cultural impact of this song is often overshadowed by the louder, more famous tracks on the album. But musicians know better. Musicians listen to because and hear a challenge. They hear a standard of excellence that is terrifying. The blend of the voices is so seamless that it becomes impossible to distinguish individual personalities. Lennon's nasal edge, McCartney's pure tone, and Harrison's textural support meld into a new instrument. This is the ultimate goal of any ensemble, the dissolution of the self into the collective sound. In a modern era obsessed with individualism and the cult of the solo star, this demonstration of collective harmony is a radical act. To claim Because is a masterpiece is not hyperbole. It is a technical assessment based on the criteria of Western art music. It satisfies the criteria of high art: complexity, structural integrity, emotional resonance, and innovation. It took the raw materials of rock, electric guitars, amplifiers, attitude, and applied the rigor of classical composition. It stands as a testament to the fact that the Beatles were not just a boy band that got lucky. They were musical sponges who absorbed everything from Karlheinz Stockhausen to Motown and synthesized it into a new language. Because is the apotheosis of that synthesis. It is the moment where the experiment succeeded completely. It is rare to find a track that feels completely timeless. Play Because today, alongside modern ambient or indie classical tracks, and it does not sound dated. It sounds like it could have been recorded yesterday by a band of geniuses in a basement in Brooklyn or Berlin. That is the mark of true quality. Production trends fade. Gated snares and auto-tune will sound ridiculous in 20 years. But good voice leading? A perfect Neapolitan chord resolution? That is physics. That is eternal. That is why this song survives while the bubblegum pop of the same era has rotted away. One must also consider the placement of the song on the album, emerging immediately after the bright, optimistic acoustic strumming of Here Comes the Sun, because serves as a stark, jarring contrast. It plunges the listener from the sunlight back into the shade. It acts as a somber palate cleanser, a moment of deep introspection before the sprawling medley that dominates the rest of side 2. It sets a serious tone. It signals to the listener that the pop sensibilities are shifting, and we are now entering a cathedral of sound. It functions almost like an overture, preparing the ear for the complex musical narrative that follows in You Never Give Me Your Money. Without the gravity of Because, the transition into the medley would feel unearned. The legacy of this track is found in the way it blurred the lines between genres. Before this, classical rock often meant a rock band clumsily playing a concerto with an orchestra, because showed that the fusion could be organic. You didn't need 100 musicians, you just needed a sophisticated understanding of harmony. It paved the way for the intricate vocal arrangements of bands like Fleet Foxes or the harmonic experiments of Radiohead. It proved that pop music could be serious without being pretentious, or perhaps that being pretentious was exactly what pop music needed to evolve. In an age where music is often treated as disposable background noise, because stands as a monolith. It serves as a reminder of what human beings are capable of when they push their tools and their talents to the breaking point. It is a somber, terrifying, beautiful piece of work that does not care if you like it. It exists on its own terms, perfect and impenetrable. It captures the sound of the end of the world, or perhaps the beginning of a new one. It is the sound of the Beatles letting go of the earth and drifting into the void, taking us with them. It asks us to confront the silence, to confront the beauty of the void, and to find comfort in the fact that the wind is high and the world is round. Therefore, the next time someone tries to tell you that rock music is inferior to jazz or classical, play them because. Do not say a word. Just let the arpeggios start. Let the Neapolitan chord hit them. Let the 9 voices surround them. If they are not moved, if they do not understand the sheer magnitude of what is happening in those frequencies, then they are lost. But for those of us who listen, really listen, because remains the gold standard. It is the track where the Beatles stopped being a band and became a phenomenon of nature. It is not just a song. It is a challenge to listen better, to demand more, and to recognize that within the confines of a pop album, high art can, and did, exist.